Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
An Irishman in Northern Mesopotamia, a journey of discovery in South East Türkiye with a personal perspective, is a new and fascinating book by Nicholas Mackey, who's a writer and photographer with a lifelong passion and storyteller, who says it all began when, as a child, he was given a camera. Delighted to say that Nicholas joins me live on the line now. Nicholas, good morning to you.
Good morning, Giles.
Thanks for joining me this morning. Whereabouts do we find you this morning?
I'm in London. It's sunny, thank goodness. The weather's been up and down all over the place, freezing on Friday and almost like a spring day yesterday. So take your pick, Giles.
Indeed, 4 seasons in one day. Presumably when one is heading out to the cradle of civilization, if you like it, you can the British always talk about the weather, but you know, it is going to be particularly more pleasant. You are a bit of a Renaissance man. There's a broad subject, you know, a broad range of subjects you have studied and got involved with, all starting with a camera, as being given a camera as a child.
That is correct. I was very fortunate as a 7-year-old boy to be given a very old-fashioned, like a pre-World War I camera by my grandmother. And that started my journey in photography, really. And I suddenly realized at a very early age, I could actually make pictures. And that opened up this magical universe of creativity. And simply, I've been that child ever since, Giles. I'm still exploring. I'm still learning.
You see, you could do that creativity, that world of creativity, but perhaps having a nice studio somewhere warm and cozy, and you know, do fashion shoots and I know, car shoots, and be surrounded by supermodels. But you decided that there was a whole world to discover out there. When did the wanderlust bug bite?
Very good question. I think it began to bite when I was sitting on my father's knee, and I was most fortunate because he was a very good storyteller, and he filled my head with tales of the ancient world, ancient Greece, ancient Rome, and Mesopotamia. And I remember 8, 9, 10 years of age thinking, I want to visit these places. The only problem was that as a child, we weren't well off. In fact, we were struggling sometimes financially. However, I was so grateful because my father ensured that we had a healthy stash of books at home. So for me, my escape to these wondrous far off places was reading about them. But I promised myself one day I'll go there. And hey ho, it only took another 50 years, but at least I got there 50 years later to Northern Mesopotamia.
The book is an Irishman in Northern Mesopotamia. Do you think there's something particularly about the fact that of all the Celtic nations, that the Irish are perhaps known as the most, with the Scots coming in, I would say a very close second, but the Irish have a history of travel, of going to new places. I mean, my friend Pierre used to say that the Irish passport was the best passport to have if you were in a war zone. There is wherever you go, you will find the Irish.
Perfectly true. I have to say, I have traveled widely. I've been very fortunate to be able to do that. And I have to admit that everywhere I've gone on this planet, when I reveal that I'm Irish or I show my Irish passport, I'm met with a smile, with a welcome, with a warm comment. And I notice that then people want to identify with something Irish. And that to me shows that they are human beings, want to bridge a link.
Because we're talking about shared experience and looking at Northern Mesopotamia, look at this particular corner of Turkey, and you can, you know, I am that worst sort of creature. I'm the armchair historian. But this particular, what area are we talking about here, Nicholas? Draw me, if you like, because the modern borders don't do it justice, do they?
Okay, good question. Mesopotamia, actually, the word itself comes from the ancient Greek, meaning between two rivers. Meso means between, Potamia means rivers. And the two major rivers of this region are the Euphrates and the Tigris. Now, I just want you to imagine Turkey as and excuse me for saying this, it would be, let's say, like a rectangle. And if you go to the right-hand bottom corner of that rectangle, that would be the part of Turkey that we visited. Oh, and by the way, the Turkish government made a decision about 3 years ago that from now on, they wanted their country to be called Türkiye. Mm-hmm. So that is the correct nomenclature to use, by the way, Giles. So South East Türkiye actually forms Northern Mesopotamia. And as you probably well know, Mesopotamia does extend into Iraq and Syria. We didn't go there because of personal safety reasons. So we just stuck to that part of Turkey.
Because, I mean, this is the land that, obviously, this is the Seljuks were there. This is the land that, I mean, if you go from Constantinople, the Byzantine Empire, this has had the Ottomans, obviously. It has a rich cultural history that we tend to overlook. We tend to sort of think, oh, well, it's Türkiye, and thank you, Nicholas, is Ankara, and then it's sort of holiday resorts. But one of the things, I suppose, about the area that you're looking at is it is relatively untouched, relatively underdeveloped. And so there are fascinating finds, both archaeologically, but also with the people themselves.
Goodness me, yes. I mean, it is an incredible tapestry of different groups of people, different languages, different cuisines, different music. You name it, Turkey's got it. And I mean, for me, my family loving described me as someone who loves old piles of rocks. And when I see an old pile of rocks, I'm off like a shot, like a kid, you know. But the thing is that Turkey is so richly endowed with these. It's not just the fact that I'm interested in things that are old. I want to learn from it. And what I'm learning from it is that civilizations now are being traced not just back maybe 3,000 or 4,000 years, but in a site called Göbekli Tepe, which is in that region of northern Mesopotamia. It is estimated that it could be as old as 14 or 15,000 years old. In other words, there was human civilization there working in, as a group of people with a place of worship, living together, that's nearly 15,000 years old. And that blows my mind.
And also that sort of that puts into context, what we think of as cradle of ancient civilization, be it, the Egypt, for example. We're looking at maybe Persia, looking at Greek and Roman, etc. But this points back to a far older civilization. How much sort of knowledge of this did you have before you set out?
None.
Right. So when you don't just book a ticket and go, right, I'll just rock up and see what we find. Surely not.
No. What happened was, look, the genesis of this book, Giles, was that it wasn't a book when I started out. When I went on this trip with my wife and two dear friends, we had the most wonderful tour guide who opened a magical door. And I started to realize there's a whole lot of stuff about Turkey and civilization that I don't know. I was taking copious notes. I thought I might write an article for a newspaper or for a magazine. Anyway, long story short, the idea of a book then took hold. I began doing research at the British Library. And by the way, hats off to the British Library, a treasure trove of information about that part of the world. In fact, my wife said to me, Nicholas, have you taken residence at the British Library? The point is, though, that I learned so much. I'll give you just one example of, I have to confess, my ignorance. When I was looking at the history of the city of Urfa, our guide asked us, he just kind of wanted to test our knowledge, I think. He said, do you know how many civilizations were in Urfa, let's say, before the Romans? And I guessed 3 or 4. And he corrected me and he said, actually, Nicholas, there were about 12. And it goes way back. And when I did the research, I noted that he was perfectly correct.
I'm thinking like the Phoenicians, who always remind me of like being the ancient version of New Zealand students in a camper van passed through at one point. I'm just trying to think of who else could have popped by, Sansanads, that sort of lot. I mean, who else was there in that case?
Well, you had people like the Elamites, the Hurrians, the Lycians. Of course, you had the Greeks, the Romans, and many others that just don't pop into my head at this moment. But they're all there with their own distinct culture, their own language. They even had their own alphabet. They had a thing called cuneiform writing, which looks like wedge-shaped squiggles that were put into wet clay, which was allowed to dry. And this form of writing began about 5,000 BCE, before the Common Era. And over many years, it morphed from being merely a method of recording, how many cows were sold, to a means of recording literature, poetry, and so on. So if you go way back, these were people who were very cultured and lettered and observed the stars, made their cosmological observations on these stone tablets, which we can now view today.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because the history that we are having to appraise, and so you say BCE as opposed to BC, because we're approaching history of any region on the road to the Crusader states, Outremer, etc., from a Western European Christian viewpoint, which sees them as as barbarian, well, not sort of barbarians, but not of the faith, and so therefore our look at history and our look at how we regard, and then it is slanted from a Christian perspective, but also with Ataturk and the new Turkey who overthrows the Ottoman, and they're trying to make obviously the young Turks, the army officers, to drag Turkey into the as it was then sort of the 20th century, with no regard to this colourful this mezcla, this mix of civilizations and histories.
Correct, absolutely. But there's something else I just want to add in, Giles, if I may. My father was an academic, and he was a historian by profession. And one of the things I learned from him was, when studying history, do it without prejudice. And this is one of the things that I've always attempted to maintain, an open view without prejudice, I hope, about what I'm looking at. And one of the things that I came across when doing the research for this book was there was a place of learning, a place of literary activity way back in the 9th and the 10th century in the ancient city of Haran, where people were involved in translating works from the ancient Greek into Arabic, and then working on them, improving on the work of Ptolemy, etc., etc. And these works in turn were then translated into Latin, that people like Galileo and Nicholas Copernicus could actually learn from these Arabic and Turkish ancestors in their sphere of science. So in other words, this area played a key role in the transmission of knowledge from Europe to Asia back into Europe again.
Yeah, and you could also argue, because what happens in sort of the 700s with the Caliphate of Damascus, and that comes all the way across North Africa, finally ending up in my part of the world, or our part of the world at the moment, it goes through the Iberian Peninsula, and therefore we have the great sort of libraries at Córdoba and Sevilla. That's fascinating indeed. But it's not just the transcripts, but it's the colourful. You can see that influence in the way that people live and the way that people are. And there's a photograph of I believe it's a horse, it might be a donkey, but dressed in their best to go out for the night somewhere. And I just thought, bam, that is absolute sort of, that is traditional, tribal, whatever you want to call it, in the 21st century.
Yes, that was in Mardin, if I remember correctly. And the thing about it was that as we travelled, we met various people, all friendly, all welcoming, and all wanting to share their story. And this made a deep impression on me. So that I think it's also how you present yourself as a human being to others, and they then respond in kind. And this, for me, is the golden rule of overcoming difference. I don't want to sound too cliche about it, but for me, this is what is one of my abiding memories of that trip. And I wrote the book with that in mind. And it was very important for me that hopefully that message comes through. And I don't want to sound preachy about it, but it comes through in the reading of the book. Because,
you know, in a world where we are being told that certain sectors of our community are all caricatures and two-dimensional, it is surely the warmth of the human experience that brings us together. And if you think that Turkey or that particular area is all defined by various fundamentalist organizations, then this book is obviously going to open your eyes to the fantastic kaleidoscope.
I think it's, I think the media portrays it maybe in a negative way. My experience, and I've been over the last, 18 years now, traveling to Turkey. I've been there virtually every year, in some cases twice a year. And my experience of Turkey is it's very much live and let live. And it even goes further than that. Oh, you're a foreigner? Let me learn from you. You know, it's that kind of open-hearted attitude that is part of the character of the Turkish people that we meet wherever we go, whether it's in Istanbul or in some remote, rural region. And that's why I'm looking forward, actually, to visiting the country again many times, because I know I'm going to not only enjoy the experience, but I hope learn from it. Because I feel that I've still, even though I'm 69 years of age, I feel like a kid again, because it's almost like I'm in a sweet shop. I'm learning new stuff, and it's so exciting.
What do you hope that people are going to take from an Irishman in Northern Mesopotamia? What do you they're going to rejig their history? Because this puts an incredible spin on it, doesn't it, about the cradle of civilization and that particular area of the world.
If I may, I prepared an answer which I'd like to read for you. In my book, I hope to share a journey that transcends borders, exploring themes of identity, belonging, and cultural connection. I invite listeners and readers to embark on this journey with me and discover a rich tapestry of Northern Mesopotamia. My hope is that this book inspires people to overcome difference, to let go of the need to dominate, and to embrace harmonious coexistence.
That is wonderful. The book is called An Irishman in Northern Mesopotamia, A Journey of Discovery in South East Türkiye, we're calling it?
Türkiye,
thank you. By Nicholas Mackey. Nicholas, if people want to, you can order it via our own virtual bookstore, listeners. If people want to find you and discover more about you and your writing, Nicholas, where's the best place to go?
It would be to my website, nicholasmackey.org.
Apologies, Nicholas, for getting the surname a little bit skew. I said the book is called An Irishman in Northern Mesopotamia. Nicholas Mackey, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much, Giles. It's been a real pleasure talking to you and talking to your listeners.